You know what's strange about people born in the 1990s? They're the only generation in history who grew up in two completely different worlds, and their minds had to adapt to both. They remember a life that no longer exists, a life without constant connection, without algorithms, without being watched. But they also became adults inside a world that never stops watching. And that split quietly shaped how they think, feel, and experience reality. If you were born between 1990 and 1999, you exist in a moment in history that won't happen again. You're not fully part of the past. You're not fully part of the present. You're the transition, the bridge between Saturday morning cartoons and infinite streaming, playing outside and living online, privacy and permanent visibility. And here's the part most people don't realize. That kind of childhood doesn't just create memories. It creates a very specific kind of mind.
It's the late 90s. You wake up early on a Saturday, not because you have to, but because your favorite cartoons are on. You sit on the floor, bowl of cereal in your hands, completely absorbed. No skipping, no pausing, no replay. If you missed it, it was gone. And somehow that made it feel more important, more real. Then you go outside, not because someone told you to, because there was nothing else to do. You make games out of nothing. A stick becomes a sword. An empty street becomes a world. Time moves slower. You're not documenting anything. You're just there. And without realizing it, your brain is learning something rare, how to create stimulation instead of constantly consuming it. But your childhood didn't stay like that, because while you were growing up, the world was changing, quietly at first, then all at once.
You remember rewinding VHS tapes. Then DVDs felt revolutionary. You remember dial-up internet, the sound, the waiting, the patience. Then suddenly, everything got faster, easier, instant. You learned to research in libraries, but you also learned how to search online. You wrote by hand, then typed, then lived through screens. That experience did something unusual to your brain. It made you fluent in two completely different systems of reality. One slow, physical, and present, the other fast, digital, and infinite. And then came the biggest shift of all, social media. Before it, your life was yours. Embarrassing moments disappeared, mistakes faded. Identity was something you figured out privately. There was no audience, no performance. Then suddenly, there was. Profiles, likes, followers, validation that could be counted. And without realizing it, you learned a new skill: how to be seen. But here's where things get complicated, because you didn't grow up with that system. You adapted to it. Which means part of you still remembers what it felt like to exist without being observed. And another part of you has learned to constantly observe yourself. That creates something psychologists call a kind of internal conflict. Not loud, not obvious, but constant. On one side, you value real connection, presence, authenticity. On the other, you live in a world that rewards performance, speed, visibility. And your mind is trying to balance both, all the time. That's why people born in the 90s often feel something they can't fully explain. A quiet dissatisfaction, a strange kind of mental fatigue. Not because life is harder, but because it's different from what they were prepared for. There's also something else happening, something deeper. When you look back at your childhood, it feels different, warmer, simpler, more meaningful. But that's not just memory. It's how your brain works. Your mind edits the past like a highlight reel. It keeps the feeling and removes the noise. So what you miss isn't just the 90s. It's the experience of being fully present, without comparison, without pressure, without an invisible audience. And because you lived through the transition, you're one of the only groups of people who can actually feel that difference. clearly. That's why nostalgia hits you harder, because you're not just remembering moments, you're remembering a completely different way of existing. And yes, this shift has consequences. Some research suggests that people born in the 90s report higher levels of anxiety and emotional stress compared to previous generations. And one possible reason is this. You were raised with one set of expectations and forced to adapt to another. You learned that friendship is built through shared experience, but now it's often maintained through screens. You learned that self-worth comes from what you do, but now it's often measured by how you're perceived. You learned patience, but now everything is instant, and that mismatch creates pressure, not visible, but psychological. But here's the part people overlook. Being a 90s baby didn't just make things harder. It gave you something rare: perspective. You know what life feels like without constant connection, so you can disconnect. You know what real presence feels like, so you can recognize when something feels fake. You understand both worlds, not theoretically, but from experience. You can adapt without completely losing yourself. And that's something newer generations never had, and older generations never needed. Today, you exist in between, not fully analog, not fully digital. You translate between generations. You explain the past to the future, and the future to the past. And yes, sometimes that feels confusing, like you don't fully belong anywhere. But maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe it's awareness. Because you don't just accept the world as it is, you remember what it was, and that gives you a rare ability to question it, to step back from it, to choose how you engage with it. You're not lost between two worlds. You're one of the only people who can see both clearly. And maybe that's why this feeling follows you, this quiet sense that something is missing. It's not the past, it's not the 90s, it's the feeling of being fully present in your own life. And the truth is, that feeling didn't disappear. You just have to choose it again. If this felt personal, you're not the only one. There are millions of people carrying this same invisible split, quietly. If you were born in the 90s, drop your birth year below. I want to see how many of us are out here remembering a world that doesn't exist anymore. Because you're not just nostalgic, you're aware of something others never experienced. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.